Alrighty, y'all. Welcome to Joe's Retro World. Today, we're going to be changing the capacitors in my Sega Genesis Model 1. Now, I went to Console 5 and got the capacitor kit here. And this is for the Sega Genesis or Mega Drive Model 1. And basically, they had just one kit. So it made it really easy for the Model 1. So this kit would cover model motherboard revisions VA0 through VA6. So we're not going to use every single one of these. These are called through hole because they go through holes on the motherboard capacitors. And we'll be changing all of these, but only the ones that, of course, it has. So over here to my left, I have everything that I'm going to need. I got some alcohol sitting down here below me, 91%, and you can use any kind, as long as it's 91% or higher. I got some soldering paste. That's very important. Without soldering paste, your solder just won't work. Now, this is a cheap solder that I got with a kit, but as you can see, the diameter is 1 millimeter. NW, I don't know what that is. You get 10 grams. And then it's 7% copper with 99.3% tin. This one right here has actually worked really, really well. It's some really cheap solder that you get with a lot of these cheap Amazon kits. But man, this thing works really well. It doesn't take a lot of heat, and yeah, I ain't had no trouble with it. The other thing you need is we're gonna get some of this. This is the desoldering wick. The little copper thread that you need, so that we can clean up the vials. And the vials are the pads where everything is soldered to. Okay, that's what that is. But you're gonna need some soldering wire, de-wicking soldering wire like this. And then from flush cutters, as they call them, these are these little cutters that you can get because we're gonna need to trim the legs of the capacitors. I have a pencil so I can draw out my motherboard and label all where the capacitors go. I got a Phillips head. I don't think I'm gonna need anything other than a Phillips. We'll find out. And of course, back here I got my soldering gun going. Is nice and ready, and I have this tip that it was small, and I bent it with some pliers so that I can really get into tight places with my soldering iron. Okay, I modified that, so you might have to do that. But always make sure you keep your soldering gun clean. Clean it with either a sponge, or like me, this one came with this little brass thingy here with some liquid down here, some chemical, and that way you can constantly just clean your soldering iron because you want to clean that tip. As long as you keep it clean, you're good to go. Okay. But yeah, let's go ahead and open this up and see what is involved real quick. Let's turn her over, and we're gonna remove 6 screws, 6 Phillip heads. After removing those screws, I got them placed over here. Keep them somewhere safe. I suggest you get a little ice tray that you can buy, at any store, an ice tray. That way you can just separate your screws somewhere separately, safe. But yeah, once you remove those 6 Phillips screws, you want to go ahead and lift up the top of your Sega Genesis. Now, the first thing you want to do is you're going to have to remove the LED plug. Right over here. It's actually quite easy. Mine broke, so I only have one side. Yours will have 2 metal leads sticking out. You can pull them straight and then pull this plug out. Because mine broke, it's a little hard. Mark which side is the red, which side is the left, so you can put it correctly back, okay? All right. Now, this also allows you to literally change the LED. If you want to go ahead and change it to a different color and modify it, you can try to push the LED out. It's kind of hard because you got to remove this little plate right here. But yeah, you can do that. You can always modify it, yeah. So just be careful when you do it. But we're not doing that today. We're just taking down and we're changing these capacitors. So as you can see, it has a lot of RF shielding because in America it's required. It's required. So they just built it into all the different systems. But let's go ahead and break it down and start removing more screws. There's a lot of screws. So this is where the piece of paper comes into play. I'm going to move everything out of the way, and I am about to draw out this motherboard and write down and show all the different locations of the screws so that I know where they go back. Even though I'm doing this video, I still need to have a reference of where everything goes. And this is the best way to do it, y'all, is to actually draw it out. Let's draw it out. I went ahead and drew me a little diagram, just a rectangle back here, and I put back in front, B and F. Now I did for the RF shielding. This was what this diagram was for. So I put circles for the black screws, and I put an X for the one silver screw right here. So the rest of the places were just little black screws. So yeah, at least I know where they were going. Now you can write, short black screw or long black screw if you want. That way you can identify your diagram better than I am. I'm just doing this just for me. This is what I know. So we're going to go here and remove that RF shielding. So it exposes more. So now I'm going to have to remove these screws over here. So I'm going to have to mark them. And there's some voltage regulators right over here. So I'm going to remove these screws and I'm going to label everything. So yeah, let's do that real quick. So after removing these 3 black ones and the 2 little short gray ones right here on the heatsink, on these voltage regulator, I'm going to remove 2. I think these are also holding it down. 2 from the cartridge slot. So of course I'm going to draw this on my little diagram right here. And it's amazing how many capacitors this thing has. So we're going to use a lot of them, but of course not the whole pack. As you can see, it's starting to try to come up now because it's loose. So let me remove these. All right, we got one left right over here on the bottom left underneath the 3.5 millimeter jack. There's another little black screw right here. All right, so we'll mark that on our diagram. Put the screw to the side. It is a different size than the other one, so we're going to make sure we place it where we know to put it correct. All right, so it's safe. So now I'm able to move the motherboard out. Okay. And I'm going to show you how I go ahead and go through and remove one of these capacitors. So I'm going to have to remove these 2 gold ones down here so that this heat sink can come off. Okay, now removing these 2 gold little screws down here, y'all, with this Phillips screwdriver was really hard. I had to brace it with my back of my hand just to remove this. Yeah, that was scary. So be very careful because you can damage, capacitors or other parts of the motherboard or anything trying to remove just this. That's insane. Looks like it has some thermal paste there or something. So I got some thermal paste, but I don't know if it's necessary, y'all. But yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and put some back since I got some in there. But yeah, let's go ahead and start looking at this motherboard. Give me a second. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna go ahead and draw me a diagram right here, and we're gonna do it like this. Nothing fancy, just my diagram. Put my little controller ports, CP, CP. And we are gonna go over here and we're gonna put our expansion port. Expansion port, okay. This is just for my notes. But then we're gonna put 3 circles because there's 3 capacitors. And we're gonna write the value of them right here with a pen, nice and good. Now we're gonna go over here and we're gonna draw this chip. And then right here is the cartridge slot. Slot right there. But yeah, that way we can go ahead and label. There's 3 more capacitors. And then we'll go down over here and there's 2 slots from these 2 right here. There's an RF box. It's an RF module little box, right? Okay. And there is, what is this? 1 capacitor, 2, 3. There's a bigger one. There's a smaller one. Smaller and smaller. Okay. And then there's a chip that sits right here. Okay. And we're going to do these. So then it's 1, 2, offset. And then there's a 4th one. And then there's a 5th one. And there's a little right there. I can't remember what that's called. There's another little thingy. Oh, okay. So yeah, I need to have more room. So yeah, let me correct this. So I drew it correctly on my little diagram. Now I'm going to label them each. So I'm going to go through and find each and every one of these capacitors. So whatever the value is, then I do it. So let me show you the example right here. So let's go over here. So as example, these right here are 47 microfarads at 16 volts. So that's what that little, let me see if I can point to it. So the value is 47 microfarads at 16 volts. Now the volts, as long as you make it a little equal or larger, you'll be okay. It's the microfarads that you have to do it right. So these 3 I will find in the kit, the 47 and 16 volt equivalents, okay? So we're going to go through and we're going to go and write all these value downs of each and every one of these capacitors on this model 1 to my diagram so that we can start removing them, okay? Now everything's been labeled. I went ahead and put I put the value, 1 microfarad, 50 volts. And then I went ahead and put a slash on the little circles here. And the slash will represent where the negative side of the capacitor is. Now the board shows it very clearly. Let me show you. So yeah, you can see it there. It shows the positive right here symbol, showing that that is the side of the positive of the capacitor, because the capacitor has little legs where the longest one is the positive and the shorter one is the negative. So when we go back to install it, make sure that the polarity is correct, positive, negative, and that you got the correct value of capacitor. So let me show you how I go and remove one, and then I'm going to remove them all off camera, but I want to show you how I do one. So these 2 points here, one here, one there, these are what are holding on the capacitor, okay? So I want to go ahead and add a little bit of fresh soldering paste. And like I told you, solder is your soldering paste, flux is your friend. So I add a little bit to it, and now I'm going to take my soldering wick, braid. There we go. Sorry about that. And I am going to absorb it. I'm going to absorb as much solder as I can just from those 2 little points. All right, so now that I got them removed, I'm going to turn it around. Let's see if it actually fell out. Nope. All right, so what's going on is they have a little bit of, let me clean that off. So when they install these capacitors, they went ahead and bent the legs, just like I'm gonna do when I go to reinstall. So now that I removed most of the solder, I'm gonna go back and see if I can clip these legs as much as I can. So now I'm gonna grab the capacitor down here on the bottom. I'm gonna grab it literally like this with my fingers. Now while I have a grip of the capacitor on the bottom, I'm gonna heat the pads on the top with my soldering gun. And I'm gonna pull on that leg until it pulls out. And then I'm gonna do the same on the other side. And be very gentle because it is still a little crooked. All right. All right. I got it out. Right there, yo. So that's how I'm gonna remove all of them one by one, gently doing that so that I don't break none of these contacts that are called vios. These little spots right here that, you know, where they got to solder back onto. So I'm going to clean this with some solder wick real quick. Let's clean it up. All right, y'all. So it's nice and clean for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go with the other side and clean it too. Clean these points right here. Boom, just like that. So let me go and do every single one like this. I'm going to go and I'm going to remove them all because I already have them labeled so I know where each and everything is going back.